Garbage. It's all around us, right? Recycling garbage. We deal with it every day. We deal with it every week. I'm always dragging my trash bins out from the garage to the edge of the driveway on that certain day of the week when I know the garbage and recycling trucks are going to be coming by. And I just assume that takes care of it. If I can throw things in the garbage can and get them out of my house, that's good enough. Well, we're going to talk some trash today. We're going to be talking to a lady who ran a very interesting year-long experiment to get rid of all of the waste in her home for herself and her family. And she wrote a book about it. And we're going to spend some time talking about the truths regarding garbage and recycling and certain things that we take for granted. So take a deep breath here, put on the brakes, grab a cup of coffee, and join the conversation because it is time for Coffee Breaks with Steve. Eve Schaub is an internationally published author and humorist. Isn't that a great combination? She's the author of Year of No Sugar, came out in 2014, and The Year of No Clutter in 2017. Her third book and newest family memoir is The Year of No Garbage that just came out middle of last month in time for Earth Day. And we're going to talk a little bit about how you can get any of her books and all of her books. Eve has been featured on the Dr. Oz Show, Fox and Friends, USA Today, and the Huffington Post, among others. Her essay, Our Year of No Sugar, One Family's Grand Adventure for Everyday Health, has been viewed over 1 million times. Her books have been translated into Chinese, Hebrew, Spanish, and her writing has additionally appeared in Newsweek, the Boston Globe, Hyperallergic. Wait a minute. You know what happens anytime I can't pronounce a word? Okay, pick up where we left off. Boston Globe, Hyperallergic, Bustle, The Belladonna Comedy, Vermont Magazine, and Vermont Life. Eve holds a Bachelor of Arts and a Bachelor of Fine Arts from Cornell University and a Master of Fine Arts from the Rochester Institute of Technology. She lives with her family in Vermont and enjoys performing experiments on them so she can write about it. We're going to be talking about all of that. Please welcome to Coffee Breaks with Steve, Eve Schaub. Eve, welcome.
Hi, Steve. Thanks for that. That was great.
And I've had an opportunity to read your newest book, and I want to thank you for writing that. And we're going to talk a little bit about the revelations that come about. But you, in this book, you talk about not just going through a journey of saying, okay, we're going to eliminate garbage in the household for a year, but it's a great book because for me, it was both very informative and engaging. I mean, there were times I laughed out loud reading some of the things in there and the interactions with your family. So I guess the first question is, what prompted you to think about even considering the idea of going a year without creating any waste in your entire household?
Well, a bunch of things. I mean, I live in Vermont, which is a very environmentally conscious place to live. It's a topic of everyday conversation everywhere you go here, is how to be a more responsible citizen of the planet. But I do think that my interest in this issue goes way back. Like, I remember being a little kid and watching Oscar the Grouch on Sesame Street. And, he sings a song about I love trash. And I write about that in the book because I very distinctly remember at that time, this was pre-recycling where I lived. Everything, there was a big black garbage bag under the kitchen sink and everything went into it.
Everything.
Whether it was organic material, food scraps, cardboard and tin cans. Everything went in there.
Yeah.
And then it magically disappeared. And I remember being a kid and thinking, I wonder what happens to that. This doesn't seem right. And having this suspicion that wherever it went, it wasn't good.
Yeah.
So I have been on a journey ever since then, thinking about garbage in the back of my brain and wondering what really happens to it when it leaves our home, and thinking about the environment and the planet as well.
And I guess the next thing, and this is not the first time that you've done this, we'll talk a little bit later about a little bit more about your earlier books and some of the things that you've written in your blogs online, etc. But this wasn't just you going, hey, I'm not going to produce any waste. This was your family. And I'm curious, and you do talk about this in the book, but how did your family react to the idea of saying, hey, we're going to, this basically crazy idea of saying, we're not going to produce any household waste for a year?
So I have to preface this by saying that I have the best, most patient family of good sports ever. I don't deserve them. They're so wonderful. And I could not do any of these experiments that I have done for any of my 3 books without them. And I do think that their participation is one of the things that makes the stories more relatable and compelling. Because, you know, one person can go off and do any crazy old thing, but to take your whole family, people of different ages, people who are in school, and, you know, there's all these different factors. And I have to say that because this was our 3rd project as a family, my family was notably wary. And it was the hardest one to persuade them to go along with. Year of No Sugar was the first book, as you mentioned, and I persuaded my family to go for a whole year without eating any added sugar in our food. At that time, our 2 daughters were ages 6 and 14. And no, wait, sorry, 6 and 11. 6 and 11. There's 5 years between them. And so they were young enough at that time to not totally realize they had a choice in the matter. So it was actually quite easy to, this is just what we're doing. And I was the one providing, you know, 99% of the food they ate throughout their day. With the advent of Year of No Garbage, we did this during 2020, which we can talk about.
We're going to talk about that, yeah.
But my daughters were much older. And so my younger daughter was just entering high school. And she's like, oh, great. I just finished being, you know, the kid, the no sugar kid. And now I get to go to high school and be the no garbage kid. Great. Thanks, Mom. So they both my daughters were convinced over time that this would be a cool project. And they ended up participating and being amazing. You know, it was a great project to do with them.
But and your husband, I mean, step number 1 in any of these experiments has to be to get your spouse on board with it. What was his overall reaction at the outset of this?
He was very skeptical. And in fact, both he and my daughter Ilsa said, I don't even know how we're going to do this. I don't even know if it's actually possible. And Ilsa said, I think it's going to be way harder than avoiding sugar. And I was like, oh no, come on. With all the things you can recycle and all the different things you can, I'm sure we're going to find, you know, no, it's going to be no problem. She was right. She was right. This was harder than avoiding sugar.
Well, and you started to mention this a minute ago, but this idea, you were working on this idea and introducing your family to the possibility in late 2019 to launch this in 2020. Now, 2020, and you start this grand experiment, and we all know what happened very early in 2020. And that had a very direct effect and impact on your plans for this entire experiment and how you had to adjust to move forward, right?
Absolutely. I mean, everything that I had envisioned, everything had changed virtually overnight.
Yeah.
And suddenly all this stuff I had planned on and had started to put in place, you know, okay, I've got my bags, I've got my containers, I've got my reusable everything, and I've got all the different stores that I've researched where I can get the cheese and the bread and the milk. A lot of these stores just simply closed because they're small local entities. And the ones that didn't close wanted nothing to do with my reusable containers or even my bags. You know, they in the supermarket where I go to, they were just in the process of implementing the plastic bag ban. And they had just taken them away and they came whipping back out. You know, nobody wanted to deal with anything from your private home or environment, and for good reason. I mean, that this made sense, but it put a real damper on our project and our ability to move forward. And I had this moment of pause that I write about in the book, where I looked at my husband and I was like, I don't know if we can still do this. Can we still do this? And even if we can, is it okay? I mean, there's terrible things happening in the world, right? People are sick. People are dying. Is it all right
to
be
the priority?
Stressing? Yeah. Can I be stressing about what to do with tinfoil? Like, is that all right? You know, or broken rubber bands? Like, and so I ended up coming to the conclusion that even though the pandemic had to take priority, this still was a very, very important project. And it was something that would give me, it would keep me busy. I mean, this was a great way to preoccupy myself while the world was falling apart outside my door.
Yes. Yeah, actually, yeah, I think that's a great point too, was that there is an opportunity to not get so caught up. I mean, this almost sounds petty now that we look back, but caught up, so engrossed in what was going on. I can't even begin to tell you how many hours. Well, we all can relate to it. Just watching the news and watching the latest information and statistics, and the president coming on, the governor of our state coming on and updating everything about the pandemic. And it became very easy to become completely engrossed and obsessed with that. And probably in many ways, as you're saying, this was in a way kind of a nice distraction. But even before the pandemic hit, you were getting underway with this project. What were some of the very, very first things that you and your family did right at the outset? I mean, obviously there was some staging time and prep time as you said, okay, we're going to launch this in 2020. What were some of the very first things that you did to address doing away with, and we should say, when we're talking about doing away with waste, it wasn't just about not throwing a bunch of stuff in the garbage. This was about really trying to find ways to not produce waste.
Right. I mean, I always like to say that trash is in the eye of the beholder. I mean, what is trash, right? Trash is whatever we say it is. There is no thing that is by definition trash. So it's kind of like a weed, right? The weed is just a plant that's growing somewhere you don't want it to grow.
Yeah.
So I thought, well, if trash doesn't really exist, then I can find places for all the things I would normally consider trash to go. And so that was how I began the project. And it's very, I'm very stubborn and I'm very optimistic. And I always felt like if I just look hard enough, I will find the solution. It's out there. And this project definitely put that mindset to the test. I did end up finding solutions for everything. But we started with sort of the most basic things that you would, low-hanging fruit, things you would think of right away. For example, bringing your own containers places, trying to, when you go to the supermarket, you're faced with choices all the time of, do you want the paper package, the cardboard carton of eggs, or do you want the plastic carton of eggs? So right away, we're making different decisions based on the packaging. 40% of the packaging, 40% of the plastic that gets produced every year is for single-use plastic packaging. So right there, that's low-hanging fruit. And we wanted to, and plastic, of course, as you know, because you've read the book, became our nemesis. It turns out there is somewhere for all these different things to go, whether it's glass or tinfoil or cans or cardboard. But when it comes to plastic, if there's a material that you're holding and you go, I don't know what this material is, it's plastic. It's always plastic. And so right away, I was thinking, oh, how hard could it really be? I mean, we have a recycling container and we can put so many things in it. We can put in all of those normal suspects, the glass, the paper, the cardboard, what have you. And our garbage service provider accepted plastics number 1 through 7. So that's the resin identification code that's in the little chasing arrow triangle on the bottom of almost all plastic packaging. And I thought, well, 1 through 7, that covers a whole lot. How much more could there be? So much more.
Yeah.
And it's the kind of thing you can't know until you actually sit down and do it. And that was what I wanted to find out. And I was astounded.
So let's follow up on that in a couple of ways. First of all, you're talking about recycling, and I think most people's immediate reaction to getting rid of waste is to think about, well, if there's more that I can purchase, if there's more that I can use that can be recycled, that answers everything. It turns out that simply saying recycling, you discovered a lot about recycling through this process and uncovered some things both practically and scientifically. You're talking about the different classifications of plastic, but there was a
Yes.
lot even about how things are manufactured and how our recycling is handled when we do put it in the recycling bin and send it off in that special truck that has the recycling symbol, picks it up, or we take it to a recycling center. We assume we've done our duty. Talk a little
That's
bit
right.
about what you discovered about recycling itself.
So what I discovered, much to my amazement, was that a lot of the time, things that we have worked so hard to get to the right places, to go get recycled, to have good things happen to it, so often, at least when it comes to plastic, those things are not happening. Plastic, what I learned, I actually ended up I was trying so hard to get to the bottom of this question of plastic. Plastic became the Darth Vader of our year of no garbage. Whenever there was a problem, it was always about plastic, different
Yeah.
kinds of plastic. And there are more kinds of plastic in the world than you can possibly imagine. And the reason for that is because there's so many different chemical formulations. This is a synthetic material. Tens of thousands of different synthetic chemicals go into the making of this, which is why, you've got plastics number 1 through 7, but there's actually thousands of kinds of plastic. And unfortunately, what I learned, I ended up trying to find out more, and it's very hard to get to the bottom of some of these things. Phone calls after phone calls and emails, and nobody really knew the answers. So I ended up taking a college class, and it was all about plastic. It was called Plastics 101. And that's when I learned the most shocking things, which was that plastic as a material is not inherently recyclable. You can do certain things with it, but almost always that involves something called downcycling, where you're taking the material and you're making it into something that is less useful than its original use. And the reason for that is that the physical material, it doesn't hold up to the process of being turned into something else. So you have to add more new plastic, you have to add more new chemicals. It's just not a process that plastic lends itself well to. So, 85%, I think I recently read, 85% of people, when you ask them, what do you recycle? Do you recycle? Yes. What do you recycle? 85% will tell you plastic. But sadly, the statistic for what actually gets recycled is 5% of plastics. When you consider the fact that we've been trying to get better at recycling plastic since I was a kid watching Oscar the Grouch, since the 1970s, and the birth of Earth Day and the environmental movement. Ever since then, the companies that make these plastics have been telling us it's just a matter of we need to work harder. You guys need to clean them better and sort them properly and put them in the right bins, and then everything will be okay.
Everything's fine.
That is not true. And we've learned this because it's been decades. And you've got that 85% of people who are, washing and sorting and putting their recycling in the right place. And all of that plastic, it's not getting recycled. 5% is an abysmal failure. Compare that to cardboard recycling. We recycle 90% of cardboard. Cardboard is recyclable material. Sadly, plastic is not. If it's not getting recycled, then what's happening to it? You've got all these people putting it in there. Turns out when China stopped accepting our plastic recycling way back in 2017, what happened was all of that supposedly recyclable plastic has to go somewhere. So it's gone to other countries around the world. And there is a very informative movie called The Story of Plastic, which I highly recommend everybody watch if you can. And it shows you footage of our recyclable plastic strewn across the landscapes of developing nations around the world, everywhere from India and Kenya, Myanmar, Thailand. It's horrifying. This is all bribery, illegal. It gets dumped on the landscape. Somebody gets paid off because it's got to go somewhere. And it's not going to get recycled. So instead it gets dumped in their landscape, and literally their children are playing in our supposed recycling.
Supposedly
So
recycled.
this is an ethical problem for us. This is our plastic. We need to do better.
I put this up here. Shalane asked a question about, isn't there a kind of mushroom they recently found that eats plastic? And I think both answering that question, but also kind of transitioning here to talk about organic materials and compostable materials, because that was another part of your journey.
Yes. So we of course, we live in Vermont. We're very fortunate that we have a compost bin, and we were able to really just ramp up our use of the compost bin. And anything, that's organic in any way, and also paper material. For example,
Right.
what we found is that, pizza boxes, people will tell you, well, there's pizza grease, there's food grease, food containers
Can't
that are made of
recycle.
paper or
Yeah.
cardboard. You're not supposed to put those in the recycling, but
Right.
you can put them in your compost bin. So that's wonderful. But there are a lot of so-called bioplastics or compostable plastics out there. And I hate to tell people this, but the bad news is that they're not really any better than regular plastic. And in fact, if you go to, like, we have a coffee shop that in particular, they've got all these, cups that have little cheeky little messages like, don't toss me, I'm compostable, yay. And you get it home and you realize that it's not able to be put in your home compost at all. It will not break down. There is a big difference between home compostable and industrially compostable. Well, how do I get this to industrial composting? If I can't put it in my home compost, if it won't break down there, well, you got to take it back to the coffee shop, which is a half an hour away. So all of a sudden, this doesn't sound so environmentally friendly anymore. And it's a system that doesn't work very well. So when somebody tells you something is compostable, be suspicious. Ask them if it is home compostable. The conditions in an industrial facility, they have very specific pressure and temperature requirements to actually make this stuff break down. So it's not as good a thing as it would seem.
We obviously won't have time to get to everything that's in your book, which is a great plug to say, get the book.
Get the book!
And one of the things I told you when we were chatting previously was that I jokingly said, I read your book and I found it humorous and informative, but it was a bit intimidating because, and I said that really in a joking way, I didn't really find it intimidating as much as I found it very eye-opening, because to me, it was jaw-dropping how much you and your family did discover and were able to do over the course of the year. I mean, I'll just mention quickly that you've got things in the book talking about different bathroom products and kitchen products and a variety of just household things beyond the cardboards and the plastics that we encounter and the glass that we encounter and what goes in the garbage can and what goes in the recycling bin. You discovered products that are daily use types of things that were, either getting to just reusables within your home. Don't use the paper plates, use the ceramic plates or whatever that can be washed, but also products that are environmentally friendly to wash things with and to use to brush your teeth and a variety of things. And again, we're not going to have time to go through those entire lists, but you provide that information in the book. So I'm going to tell people, get the book, and we'll talk a little bit more about where they can get more information. But as the year came to an end, the experiment is finished. What did you find that really changed you and your family in terms of what you are now started doing beyond 2020 and have continued to do because of that increased awareness and what you found you could do practically?
Well, I think that's an excellent question, because of course, whenever we do one of these year-long projects, it's a profound change, right? You learn so much, and change can be uncomfortable, but then when you make that change, you can't unknow the things you've learned, right? Now that I know where the plastics are going when people are putting them in recycling, I think about it way differently. I behave differently. It feels like a much more urgent concern. And we do not live 100% zero waste anymore. We do create garbage, but I will tell you that all the garbage we create, 100%, is all the single-use disposable plastic that we cannot possibly avoid or find a way yet to avoid buying basically when we buy our groceries.
Yeah.
So our garbage is all plastic, and we constantly try to minimize that as much as possible.
What's a good go ahead. Go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, I do lead people through. I feel like I tried every zero waste product that is out there in the world. So I have a lot of good information about what I liked and what our family liked and what we didn't. But it's also true that, our personal responsibility is very important. It's important how we go about our day, how we live our lives. The decisions we make are important. But what I also learned is equally important, if not more important, is our culture as a whole and the big picture. And the plastic waste crisis is not something that you individually have created. We did not ask for this. The single-use plastic that's being created is not something we're demanding. It's something that's being pushed on us. It's a matter of supply. The plastics industry is very powerful, and it's the same industry as big oil, because plastics are made with fossil fuel. Right. So this is a big problem. And you can change, you can buy a bamboo toothbrush and you can buy a shampoo soap bar, but it's not going to fix the overall problem, which is one of corporate responsibility and legislation. And I talk about that in the book as well.
And how we can become advocates as well as appropriate consumers. I'm going to share here, if people want to find out more about you and find out more about your books and where they can get them. First of all, you have a website, which if you want to just very quickly, and we'll follow up with this, make sure this information is out there. But what is the actual, how can people find your website? What is the www for your website?
So it's eveschaub.com. So it's
simple.
It's very straightforward.
and they find out, not only will they find out information about your books out there, but they will be able to see your blogs. They will see some videos. They will find out a lot of great information about what you have done and what you are doing. And so I would suggest people go there. Where's the easiest place for people to find your books? Is it on your website?
You can find it on my website. I have several different links. You can go to Amazon. You can also go to your local independent bookstore. In most places, books are sold.
That's great. And again, I've already told you, well, I'm very thankful for the opportunity already to have received and read Year of No Garbage. I want to follow up by reading your other books. You have the Year of No Sugar and the Year of No Clutter. And so it brings up a question, and that question is, what's next? Do you have another experiment in mind? And if so, does your family know about it yet, or are you still percolating something in the back of your mind?
So
by the way, that was an evil laugh. That's
yeah, maniacal laugh. Yes, I had to promise my family, in the process of convincing them to do Year of No Garbage, that this was the third and final project in this series. And I feel really good about that, actually, because we started with talking about the things we put into our bodies. Mm-hmm. And then we talked about the things that we bring into our homes. And then we talked about the things that we put into the environment, which, full circle, actually end up coming back and ending up in our bodies as well.
That's great. And
so
plus,
it felt like a nice, neat way to end the trilogy.
And that trilogy, and then we'll wait and see, because you are a fantastic author, by the way. I thought the book was so extremely informative. There is so much fantastic information in there and equipping that people can apply to their own lives. And one of the things that you also told me, I was just going to say, though, there's so much wit and humor and that personal touch that's throughout. So it's not just a science and technology book. It is a personal story. It's telling your story. And I really appreciate that. And one of the things you told me is you don't want this book, and I guarantee you, to me, it didn't come across this way, but you don't want this book to be a guilt trip where people go, well, I guess I need to do better. It really is just you're sharing your story, and you're sharing information that is very practical. And I just want to encourage you, because this book, and again, I'm looking forward to reading the others, is so well written. Please consider whether it's part of an experiment with your family or not, thinking about what you can write next, because you do a fantastic job.
Oh, Wow. Thank you so much. That's incredible to hear.
Well, it has been a pleasure spending this time with you, Eve, and I just want to thank you again for taking the time to join us on Coffee Breaks with Steve. There will be more information for those of you out there on the Coffee Breaks with Steve site, and you can continue to follow up. And I just encourage you to get a hold of this book. And I'll continue to plug as I get the others and read them. I'll continue to plug Eve's writing in her books. And we'll see what may come up next from Eve Schaub, because we're going to keep in touch.
All right, that's a deal.
All right. You have a great rest of your weekend. And thank you once again for joining us, Eve.
Thank you so much, Steve.
Oh man, I'll tell you once again, just great information from Eve, and I think, as you could tell, it's this. She's got this great scientific and technical mind when it comes to the research and it comes to all of these things, but just also that she talks about being a humorist, and that humor and the wit and what she's doing with and through her family and their responses to things and how they deal with things all comes through so very clearly. I just want to let you know very quickly what's going to be coming up in the next few weeks on Coffee Breaks with Steve. Before we go next week, we're going to be talking about play. We're going to be talking about the importance, not just for kids, but for adults, and the benefits to our mental and emotional health, but our physical health from play. There's some great books out there, and actually some sites where there have been tremendous studies done about the benefits of playing. And we think as, well, I play, I'm online all the time. No, we're talking about grown-ups getting out there and doing the things that we did when we were kids sometimes, and doing things with kids and how beneficial that can be. We'll talk about that next week. This one's going to be fun. In a couple of weeks, Shalane's going to join me again. She appears from time to time as a guest co-host, and we're going to play a little game with all of you. We are all familiar with certain quotes that come up in memes and come up in our daily lives, and we've used them sometimes to share and motivate people. We say certain things, and the reality is that so many of the quotes that we use, we don't have the actual quotation correct. We misquote things because that's how we learned them, or we misattribute them, or we have them out of context. And so we're going to play some games in a couple of weeks to just find out how much we really know about the quotes that we often use. And then in the next few weeks, we're going to be getting into the month of June. And I just wanted to very quickly share some things that are going to be coming up. We got a very special episode coming up the first week of June, which is going to align with one of the national days, which is Best Friends Day. And I've got an interview that was done in advance, pre-recorded, with a couple of best friends who are going to talk about how their friendship developed and what it means to really be friends with someone from their perspective. And then in mid-June, we've got an actress who has done things on Broadway. She's done things in movies and television, and is now teaching and directing and helping other people reach their goals. A lady by the name of Alexis Cara. And Alexis is going to join us on the show to talk about her career in the acting business and what her encouragement is for people who are looking to find their own way out in the world. And then on the Saturday of Father's Day, we're going to talk about something called a dad's story. And I'm actually going to be sharing my dad's story, his history and his story. My siblings hopefully will help me get ready for that one. But my dad had an amazing life as an individual, but also was an amazing dad. And so we're going to take time to share one story so that we can honor the various dads who are out there, and just like we're going to honor moms this week. So I just want to encourage you for that. And if you have topics, or you can think of a guest we need to have on Coffee Breaks with Steve, would you please let me know? You can write to me at that same email address I shared earlier for special days, cbwsteve@comcast.net, to share ideas. Particularly helpful if you know somebody that you think would be a good guest on here, then you can make an introduction. But I'm just glad to get the ideas and love to hear from you. And that, again, is another way that you can be a part of what we're doing here. So I just want to strongly, strongly encourage you to let me know about those things. Listen, I want to thank you once again for being here today. I want to thank you for being a part of the conversation. And, when we talk to people like Eve, it's just another reminder that we all have opportunities in our day-to-day lives. as consumers of certain things, as participants in our communities, as advocates, reaching out to people who do have an opportunity to make change in government and other places. We all have power. We all have strength. And so I just want to say once again, as I do every week, please have a great week and find a way to make a difference in your world this week. God bless you. Have a great week. We'll see you next time.